Clara Oswald is a somewhat divisive character among Doctor Who viewers. A character first introduced in Series 7 of modern Doctor Who, Clara stuck around for over 2 seasons and 2 different incarnations of the Doctor, going on a variety of adventures during her run. So why do people have such differing opinions about her? My name is Ellie Blackwood. I'm a fantasy writer in progress and I love overanalyzing Doctor Who. And today we're going to explore why so many people hate Clara Oswald. In the year and a half or so that I've been making Doctor Who videos, first on TikTok and now on YouTube, I've been struck by how uneven viewers' opinions of Clara are. It feels like a roughly 50-50 split between people who love her and people who despise her. And while I'm sure people like or dislike Clara for a variety of reasons, I've developed a bit of a theory. Whether or not you like Clara depends on your view of what the role of a companion should be in Doctor Who. For some people, Clara perfectly fits that role, and for others she breaks it in unforgivable ways. Throughout this video, you'll notice me coming down pretty heavily on one side of the divide. But I'm just one person, so I'm really interested to hear your takes in the comment section. So whether or not you agree with my takes here, leave a comment, let's discuss. And if you want more videos discussing Doctor Who books and science fiction in your life, be sure to subscribe to my channel. To properly unpack 2.5 seasons of Clara Oswald on Doctor Who, we need to start at the beginning. When we first meet Clara, she is an echo of herself. In fact, she isn't even Clara at all. The first appearance of a character that was kind of like Clara Oswald comes in the 2012 episode Asylum of the Daleks, when the 11th Doctor was still travelling with his companions Amy and Rory. This is, of course, Oswin Oswald, a junior entertainment manager on a starship that crashed into the Daleks' asylum planet. Oswin offers to help the Doctor, Amy and Rory escape the asylum as long as they take her with them. But when the Doctor comes to get her, he discovers that she has actually been turned into a Dalek and was deluding herself into thinking she was still human. However, in a show of her remaining humanity, Oswin still helps the Doctor and his companions escape right before the asylum blows up and kills her along with all the Daleks inside. Later that season, Amy and Rory are heartbreakingly cut off from ever seeing the Doctor again, and he goes to hide out and sulk in Victorian London. Which is where another version of Clara comes into play. Clara Oswin Oswald appears in the 2012 Christmas special The Snowmen. In this episode, 11 has vowed to never try and save the universe again because he's so jaded now, but a certain someone pops up to bring him out of his shell. This Victorian version of Clara leads a double life, working as both a barmaid and a high-class governess. We see her taking a pretty active role in the episode, insisting on working out who the Doctor is and getting him to save the day from the Great Intelligence. She's a really great guest character, winning over viewers with her dynamic part in the story and her charming personality. But just as the Doctor tries to invite Victoria and Clara to travel with him for more adventures, she dies thanks to one of the Great Intelligence's creations. Nonetheless, with the knowledge that Clara exists across multiple times, the Doctor is now determined to find her again. After all of that, we finally meet Clara Oswald for real. The main version of Clara is a 24-year-old nanny from Blackpool who calls the Doctor on the TARDIS phone because a woman from a computer shop told her it was a helpline. We'll come back to that woman later, but for right now it doesn't really matter. When he realizes Clara is the woman he's been looking for, the Doctor comes racing to her, and he ends up taking her to travel in the TARDIS with him while he tries to unravel her mystery. Clara Oswald has a similar witty personality to the echoes of her the Doctor met before, but aside from that, she doesn't have all that much going for her character-wise. She has a cheesy backstory about how her parents met from a leaf blowing in her father's face that caused him to literally bump into her mother, and she has a bit of a crush on the Doctor. But apart from that, Clara is less of a character and more of a mystery box. Series 7 Clara Oswald is quite frustrating to me. She's enjoyable to watch because she has some fun banter and Jenna Coleman brings a spark and charisma to the role. That said, in many many ways, she's just kind of a stereotypical spunky female assistant. She isn't afraid to speak her mind, but for most of the season, her headstrong tendencies are usually played for laughs. The Doctor himself at various points describes her as feisty and bossy, which are terms that often come across as a bit patronizing, especially when referring to women. And she never really has any huge clashes with the Doctor, mostly just going along with whatever his plan is. This is where your view of the purpose of a Doctor Who companion comes into play. If you're someone who believes that a companion is simply there to help the Doctor on their adventures and to act as an audience surrogate for wibbly-wobbly explanations, then Series 7 Clara is a perfectly fine companion. But if you're someone who thinks a companion ought to challenge the Doctor, Clara in Series 7 doesn't really do that. Aside from the mystery around her, but again, that's not really anything to do with her character and personality. Leaf anecdote notwithstanding, we know very little about Clara's family and her relationship with them. They basically only show up in the episode Time of the Doctor for a gag about the Doctor being naked at Christmas dinner and then getting weirded out. Clara also doesn't really appear to have any friends, and the kids she nannies for are there as more comic relief and plot devices than anything else. The biggest thing Clara has going for her in Series 7 is nothing to do with her as a person, it's just the mystery surrounding her. And in the series finale, The Name of the Doctor, we find out why the Doctor kept meeting her echoes. After the Great Intelligence jumps into the Doctor's time stream to kill him in various places along his timeline, Clara jumps in too. This is one of the few times in Series 7 that Clara actually goes against the Doctor's wishes. But it's still not a choice that's really about Clara. Rather than being rooted in a deep character decision for her, it's just another plot device retroactively explaining the mystery box while ensuring the Doctor can live to see another day. Inside the time stream, Clara shatters into numerous times and places, with each of her splinters all focused on saving the Doctor. That's why Oswald died saving the Doctor and his friends, though it's kind of unclear how Victorian Clara saved the Doctor exactly. So there are apparently loads of Clara splinters just out there living their lives and saving the Doctor now. Somehow, the 11th Doctor manages to yoink Clara out of his time stream and save her, and just like that, she is no longer the Impossible Girl. Now, I definitely understand why some people enjoy the Impossible Girl story. I certainly did at the time. I was 13 when this season aired, and I loved theorizing each week about what the solution to the mystery would be. At various times, I was convinced that Clara was the Master, or Rose Tyler and 10-2's daughter, or the Doctor's daughter Jenny. But all of my engagement with Clara was not about her as a character, but about her function as a mystery box. As a character, I really couldn't have cared about her less. Oswin Oswald and Clara Oswald both had active goals in their respective stories that didn't revolve around the Doctor. Oswin to escape the Dalek asylum, and Victorian Clara to save the children she was taking care of. By comparison, modern Clara in Series 7 has very little agency of her own, and her ultimate goal was just to save the Doctor. And somehow that retrospectively made Oswin and Victorian Clara worse, because it turns out their personal goals and motivations were secondary to their life's purpose of dying to save the Doctor. It makes me wonder just how much more I would have liked Series 7 if Oswin or Victorian Clara had been the companion instead. Showrunner Stephen Moffat actually admitted in a 2014 interview with Doctor Who magazine, when the character of Clara was being conceived, she started out life in early versions of some scripts for the 2013 series as a Victorian governess called Beryl. The idea was dropped, however, in favour of having the modern-day version of Clara as the ongoing companion. Clearly, Beryl was a first draft version of what became Victorian Clara. Besides people's liking of the Impossible Girl mystery, another way that I've seen fans find enjoyment in the Clara of Series 7 is in the romantic chemistry between her and the 11th Doctor. And hey, I'm not judging, Jenna Coleman and Matt Smith are hot, I get it. But personally, I find their romance more annoying and distracting than anything else. As I've said before on this channel, I'm not blanketly against Doctor-companion romances, but I need them to be firmly rooted in existing character work. I believe the 10th Doctor and Rose's romance is a good example of this. Clara and Eleven's romance isn't rooted in existing character work because, in my opinion, Series 7 Clara doesn't have much character work to speak of. Since Clara's main appeal in Series 7 was her mystery box aspect, things going forward had the potential to get a bit dicey. So what happened next after the most interesting thing about Clara was gone? At first, first, it seemed like the worst outcome of the Impossible Girl mystery's resolution was set in stone. Clara's role in the first episode after The Name of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary special The Day of the Doctor, mostly boils down to typical audience surrogate companion shenanigans. But toward the end of the episode, she has a moment of acting as the Doctor's moral compass, encouraging him to find a way to defeat the Daleks that doesn't involve blowing up Gallifrey. The problem is, I'm not super convinced that the Doctor saves Gallifrey largely because of Clara. There is so much additional character work and other circumstances pushing 11 to decide to alter the past that Clara really just gives him a little push in the direction he was already leaning. It's not nearly as powerful as, say, Donna Noble yelling at the 10th Doctor to save a family from Pompeii, or Rose Tyler convincing the 9th Doctor not to shoot a helpless Dalek. Clara's role in the 2013 Christmas special The Time of the Doctor is similarly passive. She is stated to have travelled with the 11th Doctor for about 3 years before this episode, and she has basically no character development other than having become a teacher at some point. In 11's Swan Song episode, she's mostly just there for the gag about her family Christmas dinner and to look on sadly as the 11th Doctor ages out of being the cute young man she'd fancied. With the much older looking Peter Capaldi cast as the new 12th Doctor, the romantic teasing between the Doctor and Clara was in jeopardy as well. How could viewers be interested in Clara anymore if she wasn't the Impossible Girl anymore, and any flirting with the new Doctor would come across as creepy? What followed was, I believe, some of the most interesting character writing in all of Doctor Who. The first episode of the 12th Doctor's run, Deep Breath, was jarring for a lot of viewers, including my 14-year-old self at the time. Not only was the Doctor played by the oldest actor since First Doctor William Hartnell, he was grumpy and mean. This wasn't the young, fun, happy Doctor we were used to. And it wasn't the young, fun, happy Doctor that Clara was used to either. I'm firmly of the opinion that the 12th Doctor brought to the surface the arrogance and self-loathing that had always been part of the Doctor's character. 11's charm and wacky shenanigans were mainly a front to hide his deep trauma over what he did in the Time War. And even after Gallifrey is saved in The Day of the Doctor, 12 is still obsessed with the question of whether or not he's a good man. And unfortunately for him, the answer appears to be no. Part of the reason why Clara's reaction to his regeneration hurts 12 so deeply is because he's finally showing an honest side of himself, and she can't accept him when he's not pretending. But Clara herself isn't exactly innocent of the same flaws as the Doctor either. I love the scene where the two of them meet at a cafe, each assuming that the other one left an ad in the paper as an invitation to meet, and they basically spend several lines of dialogue calling each other needy egomaniacs before they realize that neither of them placed the ad. The two of them are so very similar. It turns out that the person who actually placed the ad, and also the person who connected them to each other by giving Clara the Doctor's phone number in the first place, was the Doctor's arch nemesis, the Master. Because the Master, or Missy as this incarnation calls herself, knew that the Doctor and Clara's similarities would drive him nuts. Suffice to say, Clara's control freak tendencies are no longer dismissed as her being a feisty, bossy little assistant to the Doctor. Instead, Clara is compared to the Doctor himself, with strong parallels being drawn between their personalities. Deep Breath is also where the fluffy hints at romance between the Doctor and Clara get deconstructed and built back up into something that is, in my opinion, much more interesting. The romance isn't retconned, but it's spun into a confirmation that both the Doctor and Clara were fooling themselves about the entire situation. 12 informs Clara that he's not her boyfriend, and when Clara replies that she never thought he was, he implies that he said it more for himself than for her. Personally, I think it's pretty obvious that she did consider the 11th Doctor to be a romantic interest, and she was just lying to avoid embarrassment. Like the jokes about Clara being a bossy control freak, the romance angle matures into commentary about the Doctor and Clara's neediness and their desire to save face. It is true that in an interview, Peter Capaldi described the 12th Doctor and Clara's relationship as romantic in nature, even if most of their feelings are left unsaid. Personally, I think it's a little more complex than that. This season hints at even more similarities between the Doctor and Clara by having her act as the Doctor in some cases. This first happens in the episode Flatline, where the Doctor is trapped inside a shrunken TARDIS and Clara has to essentially be the Doctor for most of the episode. Then, in the series finale, Clara pretends to be the Doctor to try and outwit the Cybermen, and the episode even extends the gag by having Jenna Coleman's face appear in the opening credits instead of Peter Capaldi's. Clara's first season didn't see much tension between her real life and her travels with the Doctor, but Series 8 has a big focus on just that. Clara gets a job as a teacher at Coal Hill School, which is interestingly also the school that the Doctor's granddaughter Susan attended in Classic Who. There, she meets maths teacher Danny Pink and begins dating him. But she struggles to balance her adventures with the Doctor and her relationship with Danny on Earth, keeping the truth from Danny about her travels in time and space and hiding her relationship with Danny from the Doctor. And when the Doctor and Danny finally meet each other, their personalities clash, with Danny calling the Doctor out for his self-righteousness and the Doctor barely concealing his jealousy that Clara is dedicating time to someone other than him. Even after Danny knows about the Doctor, Clara keeps trying to conceal the extent of their adventures together. Personally, I think she does this as a form of compartmentalization. With Danny, Clara can pretend that she's a normal, kind, caring person worthy of love from a normal, kind, caring man. And letting the lines blur too much between her time with Danny and her adventures with the Doctor would mean risking the possibility that Danny wouldn't like how complicated she really is. Of course, that comes at the cost of her hurting Danny when he finds out she's still lying to him after she promised she wouldn't. Crucially, Danny never demands that Clara stop traveling with the Doctor, he only wants honesty from her. It doesn't help Clara's dilemma that the Doctor himself would quite like Danny and Clara's relationship to implode, and I believe the Doctor's actions in the episode Kill the Moon are an attempt to assert control over Clara. Let's just ignore the fact that Kill the Moon sucks as an episode for a second and focus on the fact that the Doctor forces Clara into a situation where she has to make an extremely difficult choice. And even when she asks him to help multiple times, he refuses to be part of the decision under the guise of wanting a human to make the call on something that affects Earth. But the Doctor has never particularly cared about this before. He makes decisions that determine the fate of Earth all the time. So I'm left with the sense that the Doctor put Clara in this situation to manipulate her into being more like him, someone who has to make morally grey decisions out of necessity. Clara isn't so easily fooled, and at the end of the episode she calls him out for his manipulation and storms away. But despite her insistence that she's going to be done with the Doctor after one last adventure on the Orient Express in space, she finds she can't quit her life with him after all. Clara finally gets up the courage to tell Danny everything about her travels with the Doctor, but she never gets the chance because he tragically dies in a hit and run. Overcome by grief, Clara attempts to force the Doctor to save Danny's life by threatening to throw the TARDIS keys into a volcano. The Doctor, however, outwits her and agrees to help her find Danny despite her betrayal because of his deep care for her. Turns out, Danny's mind was uploaded to a sort of computer cloud for souls, so Clara has the opportunity to say goodbye to Danny. But when Danny is given the chance to return from the afterlife, he instead decides to send back a boy he killed when he was in the military. Clara deeply grieves the loss of Danny, but she lets the Doctor assume that Danny lived so he can feel free to leave her and go visit Gallifrey, which is trapped in a pocket universe following the events of the Day of the Doctor. However, she doesn't realize the Doctor is lying about having found Gallifrey because he thinks Danny returned and he wants her to be happy with Danny. This situation is another clear indication of how similar the Doctor and Clara are. They're both willing to lie to each other because they both have the audacity to think they know best about what will make the other happy. But their separation doesn't last for long. With Danny gone, Clara has to reckon with her grief over him. In the episode Last Christmas, she and the Doctor face some deadly dream crabs. When she is attacked by a crab, Clara falls into a dream state where Danny is alive and has one last conversation with Dream Danny to give her a form of closure. After that adventure, the Doctor asks her to travel with him again, and she accepts. But with Danny gone, Clara no longer has anyone to keep her tethered to the real world, and as we head into Series 9, she throws herself into adventures with the Doctor anew. We hardly see her teaching at all in this season, nor do we see her interacting with many people in her real life on Earth. Unlike with Clara's first season, where there wasn't much focus on her real life because she was kind of a flat character, the focus on her travels with the Doctor in Series 9 is for a very deliberate character reason. It's all building up to her tragic demise in the episode Face the Raven. In this episode, Clara attempts to save a man who has been condemned to death by taking the death sentence on herself. Unfortunately, the rules of of the technology used to exact the death sentence means there is no way out of this for Clara. She is doomed to die. The Doctor is furious at this, blaming himself for letting her get reckless, to which Clara responds with the very telling line, "Why shouldn't I be so reckless? You're reckless all the bloody time. Why can't I be like you?" With nobody to keep her grounded to her normal life, Clara has become even more like the Doctor, picking up his tendency for taking huge risks. In a callback to how Danny's absence still affects her, she also notes that if Danny can die with dignity, then so can she, and then she goes to her doom. After Clara's death, the Time Lords kidnap a grieving Doctor and try to get him to admit a deep, dark secret. What is this deep, dark secret, you ask? The Time Lords want information about a prophesied hybrid that will one day stand in the ruins of Gallifrey, unravel the web of time, and break a billion hearts to heal its own. So they trap the Doctor in a confession dial, which has been turned into a bespoke torture chamber to get him to tell them what he knows. Instead of confessing, the Doctor manages to break out of the confession dial using many clones of himself over billions of years, using the memory of Clara to keep himself going. When he finally succeeds in escaping, he emerges onto the surface of Gallifrey. There, he accesses the Time Lord's extraction chamber to pull Clara out of the moment of her death and run away with her in a stolen TARDIS. Turns out, the Doctor never knew what the hybrid was, he just wanted to bargain with the Time Lords to give him an excuse to go to the extraction chamber and save Clara. After executing this bonkers plan, the Doctor realizes that the prophesied hybrid is actually the deadly combination of him and Clara. The two of them are so similar and so mutually destructive that they're going to cause disaster if they carry on down their path together. All the gags about Clara being the Doctor, all the scenes where Clara acts just as strong-willed as the Doctor, all the moments of twisted codependency culminate in this decision. Because the Doctor can't bear to return Clara to her death, he instead tries to wipe her memory so he can send her back to Earth where she can be safe from the Time Lords tracking her. But Clara, who has worked out his plan and is determined to keep her memories, sabotages his neural blocker so they don't know which direction it will go off. Turns out it's the Doctor who gets his memory wiped, and Clara now only exists in his mind as some faceless memories and a song. For her own part, Clara disguises the stolen TARDIS as a diner and decides to head back to Gallifrey to face her death. But because she's effectively immortal, she decides to go back to Gallifrey the long way round. Despite still being sort of alive and basically immortal, Clara has not yet returned to the Doctor Who screen. There is a brief scene in the 2017 Christmas special Twice Upon a Time when the 12th Doctor remembers her again, but that's not really the actual character. So now that we've covered all of Clara's actual development, let's answer the questions of what she did for the overall show and why some people hate her so much. Honestly, if you hate Clara because of Series 7, I'm kind of there with you. Beyond my issues with the character writing, I just find it super messy that there are countless Clara splinters scattered across time and space, and we simply have never met any in a meaningful capacity aside from Oswin and Victorian Clara. It's even shown in the name of the Doctor that Clara was the person who influenced the first Doctor to steal the specific TARDIS that he pilots to this day. You're telling me that this one person had so much influence on the Doctor's entire life and we're just ignoring it now and never having her show up again? I'm not saying there should be a Clara splinter in every episode, I'm saying I wish the Clara splinters weren't permanently still around at all. But I think post-Impossible Girl Clara had a very different and very interesting sort of legacy. Clara actually appears in more episodes than any other companion in the revival era of the show, just slightly beating her predecessor Amy Pond. And Clara was the sole companion for pretty much the entire time, whereas Amy often had Rory and River's song along for the ride. This gave the show a lot of space to focus on Clara's character and the dynamic between her and the Doctor. While I don't think Series 7 did a good job of recognizing the full potential in their relationship, Series 8 and 9 took the opportunity to reset Clara's connection with the Doctor and do something really interesting with it. As I've said before, if your view of the ideal companion is just a likable audience surrogate who the Doctor can explain things to, then Clara in Series 7 is a perfectly adequate companion. But personally, I prefer companions that deeply challenge the Doctor, whatever that might look like for the specific specific characters involved. I recently made a video with my thoughts on the latest series of Doctor Who, and one of the things I disliked about that series was the uncomplicated nature of the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday's relationship. Ruby doesn't really push back on the Doctor much, and in the few instances that she did, I caught a glimpse of what could have been a much more interesting dynamic. I actually really enjoy watching Ruby and 15 together regardless, I just prefer it when there's some mess. The approach the writers took with Clara wasn't totally new. A huge part of Clara and 12's dynamic is their codependency, which is something the show explored with the 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler several seasons before. Though I do think some of the interesting twisted codependency between 10 and Rose gets lost in the glitter of the cute romance elements. By contrast, 12 and Clara aren't exactly romantic, at least not as overtly as 10 and Rose, so the twisted elements of their relationship can shine a bit more. A companion who often pushes back against the Doctor is also nothing new. My favourite Doctor Who companion is Donna Noble, and part of the reason I like her so much is that despite her deep respect for the Doctor, she isn't afraid to call him out when she thinks he's done something wrong. Clara is similar in this regard. Another interesting parallel between Clara and Donna is their proximity to Doctorness. Donna literally becomes part Time Lord, while Clara takes on the mantle of the Doctor at several points throughout her run. The show even handles both cases similarly, with both Donna and Clara being punished for their hubris at trying to become like the Doctor. The difference is that Donna's Doctorness isn't explored very deeply, given that if she allows her Time Lord nature to surface, she will die. She basically has one scene in Series 4 and one scene in the 60th anniversary special The Star Beast where she gets to be really truly Doctor-like, and at the end she has to let her Time Lord nature go. By contrast, Clara's transformation into Doctorness is a slow burn, and it takes 2 whole seasons to deliver real consequences for her. Even then, she lives on, arguably even more like the Doctor than ever now that she is functionally immortal. But while a lot of people take issue with the fact that Clara basically gets out of dying scot-free, I think the real punishment here is her separation from the Doctor. Even though 12 eventually remembers her again, they can never be together, otherwise their nature as the hybrid will lead to destruction. This is also distinct from possibly the only companion who has ever been on equal footing with the Doctor, the Time Lady Romana, who travelled with the 4th Doctor. Romana was able to function as a counterpart to the Doctor, but because she's actually also a Time Lord, she isn't claiming power that isn't hers. I think Clara's hubris in trying to be like the Doctor may be one of the reasons that a lot of viewers don't like her. Some people prefer a clearly delineated Doctor role and a clearly delineated companion role, and Clara blurs those lines. Some people also feel that Clara being positioned as Doctor adjacent on top of her having been the Impossible Girl a season before gives the impression that the writers are trying to make her the most special companion of them all. To some, that feels forced. I have some sympathy for this criticism because it's not a good feeling to have your favourite companion who you might have loved for years only to have the show say, no, you must like this companion the best instead because she's the most awesome and important. But I think the show did all this to explore an interesting character angle that we hadn't seen from a Doctor Who companion before, rather than trying to crap all over the audience's preferences. Different people will appreciate different things about every companion, and that's okay. Clara was simply for viewers who love mess, and for viewers who enjoy interrogating the traditional structure of the show. My own appreciation for her has certainly grown over time. So what are your thoughts on Clara Oswald? Did you agree with any of my points, or do you have a different take? Let me know in the comments, I'm really excited to discuss. If you want to make sure you don't miss my upcoming videos about science fiction, books, Doctor Who, and all that goodness, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And also remember to subscribe to my monthly newsletter at the link in the description to keep up with all of my latest projects and content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.